Focus on what is the benefit to the user. Once I started switching that dynamic as to saying, what value can I give? What value can the website give? It's not about what I can get, but it's what I can give. And if your website can do that, and the more that you have assets on your site that give, you're going to have a dedicated, loyal following coming to your website that loves your content.
Welcome to Side Hustle Hero, the show that is laser focused to inspire you to take action to start or to scale your side hustle income streams. I'm your host, Joan Posivy, author of The Way Success Works. You have or will have a product or service that you know people will fall in love with. But how do you reach your people? How do they find their way to you? It's not enough to have an awesome looking website and great content. You need to get the attention of the search engines. That's where today's guest, Matt Hepburn, SEO expert, is going to help us out. He's been taking a deep dive in search engine optimization, or SEO, for the past 13 years. He currently works for John Hancock, managing the SEO for Manulife for all of Canada. So many of us acknowledge that SEO is something we need to pay more attention to, but with so many demands on our time, it can be easily pushed aside. So I asked Matt to give us some practical, clear steps that we can take to help push our rankings higher in the search engines. He talks about what we should be doing, how to do it, and what we absolutely need to avoid. By the way, when you hear us discussing keywords, know that a keyword can be a single word like shoes, or several words, or even a phrase like soccer shoes, for sale, Toronto, Ontario. That phrase is referred to as a single keyword. Be sure to catch the end of episode takeaway, where I'll share with you a couple of free resources to launch your keyword research. Now here is my conversation with SEO expert, Matt Hepburn. Hey Matt, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Joan. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Well, I'm so looking forward to having you educate us about SEO, what we need to do and how to do it. But first, how about a little bit about you? What is your background in history with SEO?
I actually didn't start in SEO. I actually am a college dropout. So I went to a school, Western State College of Colorado, back in '87, and didn't realize that it was such a party school as it was. It was kind of rumor after I left, but they kind of said it might have been in the top 10.
Wow.
All I know was that I was focusing more on partying than I was on working. And I realized within a very short period of time, I said, I'm wasting my time, my parents' time, and our money.
Right.
And I went home and I reprioritized what I was going to do and went to work right away as a painter, and did that for most of the 90s until the Gulf War. Gulf War kind of came around and nobody wanted their houses painted. So I worked for an insurance company, got introduced to corporate life, and from there was there for the Gulf War and did a little bit more painting after that. And then I met my future wife, and she basically wanted me to get my life together. I wanted to get my life together a little bit.
I love you, but.
Yeah, I love you,
you,
but.
and.
I love you, and she was patient, right? But I was doing some painting, and it was, I think, 35 degrees, 36 degrees outside. I was on the side of a ladder, and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. Started working then for a friend's family who had a mortgage company, and learned the mortgage industry. I did that for 13 years. And within 2 years, I got really tired of being beholden to realtors for their business. So right. I was looking for other means, and I took a course. And the course at that time was a binder course, right? I sent away in the mail for this course, and it was a direct mail course. So I learned how to do direct mail. Started slowly with about 500 pieces per month and moved up to 10,000 pieces per month.
Wow. This was to gain mortgage business.
This is to gain mortgage business. And this was using title data, which was public data. So you'd have the mortgage amount, the rate that was there, when it was going to adjust, the name of the person, and their address. So we were using mail merge.
Yes.
Number 10 window envelopes. And so I would send out these letters and talk about the current rates and what somebody could do. I was targeting people that had really, really high interest rates. There was this company out at that when I first started, Champion Mortgage, that I think had 24% interest rates and prepayment penalties and things like that. So
yikes.
Was able to get these people down into 6 or 7% at that time and save them thousands of dollars and consolidate debt, things like that. that was great. It was direct to consumer and the phones were always ringing. It was wonderful. But then the market crashed and I had to figure out in my 40s, what am I going to do when I grow up? So I loved the direct response I was getting from direct mail. And I said, how do I do this online? What does that mean? Right. So I started chasing that. And this is 2010. I started chasing that. There wasn't a lot of up-to-date information out there. When I started, I was doing what everybody does at first is say, how do we get around Google?
Right.
And I did that for about 2 years. And then I finally got tired of spending thousands of dollars on the latest piece of software or whatever the promise that Google totally knew how to get around.
To get around Google to rank in other search engines?
To rank in the search engines. Yeah. They're like, how do you do that? Right. So I finally got to the point where I said, what does Google want? That's all I care about. I just want to know, what do they want? And what does that mean, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's for a small business, whether it's for a large business, there's so many different ways that you can show up in Google.
Right.
And it all revolved around content, right? So relevant quality content that you're given, and it's only gotten more concentrated. Recently, there was an update in the summer that was targeted at content that's just written for the search engines and not written for the users. It's called the Helpful Content Update. And Google really its whole goal is to give the best results for its users. That's all it cares about. It doesn't really care about website owners, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So our goal as business owners and website creators and content creators is, how do we niche down to our industry? And how do we, instead of being very broad, being very specific, go down as far as you possibly can, niche down and have breadth and depth in your content. And that's going to help your users on their issues, their pain points. It's not about you. It's not about, well, it is a little bit about you, what you offer, but your content should be aimed at, how does your service or your product help the pain point of the users? So that's what you have to identify, and you identify that in different stages of their search. So earlier on, it's called the buyer's journey. It really depends upon your content. If you are an attorney, you're going to have a very fast buyer's journey because you're going to have people who are looking because they need it right then.
Got it. Yeah.
And so you have to show up very quickly and have your case studies and things like that. If you are a business that is an e-commerce business, you're going to tend to have more content about comparing and contrasting other content, other products, and kind of like best of and smashing magazine kind of comparisons, right? So you're going to have all that type of content. Each business is different, but really it's about, how do you really customize the journey for the user?
So you're saying when it comes to SEO, to really niche down as much as possible. Why is that?
Because there's a lot of competition. So if you are too broad, it is better to have a smaller audience and have it very focused. And then we know that audience is going to actually give us a lot of relevance. So one of the things you could do is, you could use, to start with, before you even do SEO, is you can use an audience research tool like SparkToro to understand, who is your audience? Where do they hang out online? What websites, what podcasts do they listen to? What social profiles do they follow? What are their demographics? Is it males from 30 to 50, or are they teenage, whatever it is, you know, and have that information. That'll allow you to do a lot of things with your SEO. So for instance, if you wanted to say, I'm a local business, I sell shoes, and I want to have a great reputation on shoes, one of the things you could do is you could take your expertise, actually go on podcasts as a guest, and get links back to your website from relevant podcasts talking about shoes and foot issues, and it would link back to them, to the website. That would actually help you in Google.
All right. So let's use your selling shoes example.
Sure.
So if that's what I wanted to do online, and I want to rank high in the Google search engine, and I'm seeing that right now that's not happening, what would be the first thing that you would suggest that I take a look at?
So the first thing is, are you wanting to rank locally, right, for a local brick and mortar store?
Okay.
Where you have a physical location that people can come in? Or is it an e-commerce store that doesn't have a location that you want to sell online? So there's two different things there. So if you are a local store, the first thing that you should do is claim your Google business profile.
Okay.
Have that totally filled out. And that's what shows up in Google Maps. and then the Google 3, what we call the Google 3-pack. Then what you want to do is you want to look at your competition. There's different tools that you can use for that to see what your local other shoe competitors, what categories are they in, how many reviews do they have. You want to look at all that data and then compare and say, well, am I in the right category? Am I in the wrong category?
And as far as that claiming the Google business,
Google My Business, as it used to be called. So it's changed and had a lot of different names. Back in the day, it was Google Places.
Right. So the only way for me to claim that Google business name is if I've got that physical bricks and mortar address?
That's right. Okay. That's right. And however, if you could be somebody like an HVAC contractor, right, who doesn't have a physical location but serves an area. Yes. So you could still claim that and have service areas that you have. And then you would just say that you serve this area.
Because there's so much free advertising there because you get to add content on all the photos and video, I think, as well.
Yes, you can add up to a 30-second video on your profile, and it doesn't really have sound, but it will show up in the second position of your photos on your profile. And depending upon the search engine result for the type that you have, I mean, if it's jewelry stores, right, that you have in a specific area, if you have a necklace that's swinging, it's actually probably going to provide more of a focal point within the search engine results than everybody else who just has pictures. Because as they're cruising by and they see that, it could attract more clicks. So it's actually a pretty neat feature.
Yeah, good tip.
You could also use posts to do things like offer, what are your discounts that you currently have? Mm-hmm. What we want to think about posts are more of within Google My Business or Google Business Profile, is more of a way to communicate a purchase interaction. People who are looking for that are looking to buy something. So a lot of people kind of use posts in the wrong way. They don't put that type of intent with that.
Okay.
But then if you don't have a local business, if you have an e-commerce store, then you're trying to show up for specific keywords and you're not tied to a location. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to optimize the brand names or the different products that you have that you're trying to sell. And you're going to have a lot of variation for color, size, whatever you want to do. And you'll have to...
I guess is that where the niche market comes in as well? Because if I've got online shoes, chances are I'm not going to be able to rank number one for that.
No, you're not. But it's probably going to be like specialty golf shoes or something like that. Okay. That would be how you would niche down. And that would be, okay, now if you're looking for golf shoes, it's a much smaller audience, but there are people that are specifically searching for that. And you could even do that with categories, but I would recommend, because some sites do that, I would recommend your whole site be relevant to that topic. You're going to have a much easier way of ranking for your content if the whole site is about your niche versus having multiple niches on a website.
Versus having just like one page devoted to golf shoes.
Right.
Okay.
So it's just much easier. It's much harder for websites that cover for instance, if we're talking about sports apparel, right, and shoes, it's much harder for them to rank for all that content just because it's covering multiple things. It's covering shirts, caps, different brand names, shoes, what have you.
Okay.
It's much easier for a hustle if we're focusing down on one niche. Okay. And if they want to have another side hustle, have a separate website for that other side hustle. And then be very specific about that. Creating content all around this.
Right.
And then your reputation is all around that for that site.
Right.
If we go on that principle, if we go to the Skechers store, it's all sneakers, right? So they're very smart in their branding that they're doing that. And it's much easier if we are trying to rank for Skechers, we can rank for any of those different types of sneakers within there. Right. Because they're all the Skechers brand.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So many people I talk to that are building or launching a side hustle, they know that SEO is important and that they need to take it into account with what they're putting out there, whether it be their website, social media, articles they write for other sites. But it can be really overwhelming and a bit of a mystery. So where should we start? Like if I am a person that specializes in copywriting, what should I take a look at first when I take a look and search for that specialty, but I'm not ranking anywhere?
So I think the important thing to start with is really about what are the services and the products that you are offering.
Okay.
Right. So that is the basis of where it's at. And then the keyword research would all revolve around that, whether you're trying to say a location-based freelancer. So it might be New Jersey freelance copywriter, or it might even be within a city that you would do that, right? So you're trying to localize that a little bit more. It's much easier to get a localized result for that type of than to do something where just to say freelance writer.
What would the difference be? Like if I'm a freelance writer, of course I can do that for myself as an English speaker, pretty much anywhere that is needed. What would the difference or the advantage of me focusing on my local geographic area?
So the difference is the competition of how hard would it be for you to rank for something. If you were to say freelance writer, there are companies that are totally dedicated to freelance writing,
okay,
that offer services that have spent millions of dollars or thousands of dollars, whatever it might be, in building links towards their site, or they've been established for a long, long time. And so the importance of links are kind of seen like votes by Google. So as long as they come from a relevant website within relevant content that's linking over to your site, then they will have a lot more oomph in pushing your keyword rankings on the page that they link to. For instance, so if you had a site that for a copywriter, let's say you had a site that was linking from a local shoe store, unless that came from a testimonial saying, hey, so-and-so wrote great copy for my shoe website.
Okay.
Google's going to find little to no relevance from that link. And it's going to not move the needle at all of the rankings of the keyword. It's really important that the relevance of the site and the content, the page content that it's being linked from over to your site is topically relevant.
And it sounds like it would serve me well then as a copywriter to get known in the community by doing articles for the local Chamber of Commerce or Board of Trade on why every small business owner needs to pay attention to this and that sort of thing. Is that
so that would certainly help with on the local side if you're at a Chamber of Commerce or something like that, because it's a local link. It could have some relevance because it's business related. If you're talking from the perspective of the writers talking to other business owners, that it could have some very relevance. And then you're not just talking about copywriting now you're talking about a business plan and copywriting and how that all ties together with SEO.
So if I'm going for that broader, wanting to offer my copywriting services to the general public anywhere, and I'm not ranking currently. So the first step then would be to be crystal clear on what you're offering and who you want to offer it to.
Your audience, yes.
So instead of me just putting it out there that I can do copywriting for you, your advice then would be to niche down. Is it for defense attorneys, or is it for accountants, or for whoever it's for?
Yeah.
And then with that clarity, then you mentioned keywords.
Right.
How is that going to impact the ranking, and how do I find those words?
So there's a lot of different tools that you can use. One of the better paid tools is called Ahrefs. It's ahrefs.com.
Okay.
And so it's a premium subscription. You could also use something that's called SEMrush, which is SEMrush.com.
Okay.
Both very popular tools. I prefer Ahrefs myself. And the reason why I prefer Ahrefs is it has a very large link database. So I can really see how hard or competitive is a keyword to rank, and what's the realistic, because I want to, with all my clients that I use keyword research for, I want to be able to say, what's realistic in the short term for you ranking for this keyword?
Right.
Are we trying to target a keyword that is way too competitive and that we're never going to achieve, right?
And how would I even know what is competitive and what isn't?
So they have an authority score. So to start with, so it'll tell you when you're putting in the keyword research on Ahrefs, you need to have this many links coming from this many websites to rank within the top 10 results for this keyword. So when we're talking about links before incoming kind of being seen as votes, it's really kind of critical. The thing that they don't take into a lot of these tools don't take into account, though, is If your site has been around for a little while and it's starting to get authority, if you internally link pages that are relevant, you can get some authority from those pages that will help push it too. So you may not need as many links as you think you do.
Links within your own pages?
Right. So when we have pages, right, we have multiple pages and we have, let's say we're talking about the personal injury attorney. So we have wide variety of topics within personal injury, but we want to link back to the personal injury product page or service page. So we're hyperlinking back to that page. They're called internal links. And then Google understands from both the anchor text and that they're all linked together, the relevancy of those pages.
Okay.
And so we want to internally link our pages that are topically relevant. Very, very, very important.
So those two websites that you mentioned for the keywords, and I'll have those addresses in the show notes, those will be able to provide me the best keywords for me to go to, the best chances of where I might rank.
You still have to vet the keywords yourself and say, basically you're creating a strategy and you're saying like, how hard is this going to be to rank? How relevant is this to the topic? So when we do keyword research, what we're really looking to do is to put in an overarching topic and then to get subtopics, questions. You also see them in Google as people also ask, related queries. And what we want to do, because Google very rarely ranks content now for one keyword. The more robust and full your page is with these other keywords, when it's appropriate to make it more relevant that way, that Google can better understand that this page is really talking about this topic and it has more breadth and depth of that topic. So that's really becoming more and more important, especially when we're talking about writing the helpful content update before, when we're talking about how do we write content for users. If we're thinking about the user first, right, the user experience, and I would take it this way. If you were going to a website and you were searching for something, what information would you want to see? And if a website was lacking some information, if you put yourself in the eyes of the user, if it was lacking some critical information, for instance, if we're talking about a lawyer's site, right? If it didn't have a Better Business Bureau marking up on it, I might be less than thrilled to be on that site because I don't know how trustworthy that site is.
Right.
If it doesn't have case studies on it. I know this is a little bit off topic to the keywords, but it's not just about the keywords. It's about the total experience on the website.
Okay.
The keywords are important because they give us the context of the page and the breadth of the page. But just as important for the website is the reputation of the brand, right? So if we have bad reviews on Yelp, or if we have a really bad Better Business Bureau score, that is a really bad reputation of that business. And that business is probably not going to rank so high because of its reputation.
Right.
So.
Well, in doing my research for today's interview, I saw where you wrote there is a large amount of information online that is out of date, which uses tactics that can get your website penalized by search engines, or that makes your communications with potential users seem like spam, which of course is something none of us want to do. So walk us through that outdated info and what's out there that we need to be aware of.
So just because it's on the internet does not mean that it is accurate information, right? Or that person has a lot of experience. They may just be parroting what other people have been saying. They could be parroting content that is from 2004 that is way out of date. There's a lot of information that's just not accurate. So some of it comes from experience. Some of it comes from common sense. There's still, if you go into different forums for SEO and you read what people are talking about, what they're planning on doing, you can see there's a lot of tactics where there are people just going to buy links from wherever they can buy them. And an old tactic was there would be people that were selling links from websites and they would say there's a score, which is called a domain authority score. And it's based upon how many referring domains are linking into a website. And it's an old tactic. Right. And so there's ways to game that where webmasters can game that information. It doesn't mean that the content is relevant. It doesn't mean on that website, and it doesn't mean that there's traffic to that website. So you have people who are buying into these other tactics that are not as relevant. So I would rather, at any day, that's just on link building. Then you have people that are using tactics to optimize their pages that seem a little odd, where they have emojis and things, or they're using tactics from literally 2008, where there's a lot of underlines, bolds, and italics within the copy. That's what it all used to look like way back in the day.
Yeah.
That was the emphasis that Google understood at that time. Moved away from that. It looks very odd when content is done that way, unless you're really trying to have something emphasized, right? That's the reason why we use bold and underline and italic, is to emphasize something. So we don't want it to show up all over the pages.
Right.
That just looks very strange.
What does work? What does Google like to see?
So they want to see, first of all, what's called a page title. The page title is what shows up in the browser up at the top and that actually, you want to have your keyword within that, but you want to have it relevantly on that. So for instance, when we were talking about the personal injury attorney, you are limited, first of all, to a certain amount of characters. I think it's 50 on mobile and 60 something or other on desktop. So I usually think it's like 50, 55 on mobile. I usually go for the middle. Then you have a meta description, which is a description. So when you look in Google's search engine results or Bing or wherever, you'll have the blue link. That's the organic link. That's the page title.
Yeah.
And then you'll have the description underneath that. So the keyword can be placed within the meta description. It's not necessarily a ranking factor, but the meta description is a call to action. It is a description of what the page is and why somebody should click through to that. And so you're trying to compel the person with real information about what the page is. You don't want to overpromise what's there. That's what's called clickbait. And then you get people bouncing off your site and people get really upset. And then within the page, there's the elements which are called headline tags. So you have a H1, a H2, and H3 tags. And these are tags that are highly emphasized for SEO. So H1 is typically what you would see at the beginning of a blog. So it's the title of the blog. And H2 is, and you only have one H1 tag. You're only supposed to have one H1 tag on a page. And H2 tag are used to talk about subtopics. And H3 tag is typically used kind of, if you had information underneath an H2, maybe like a unordered list of information, it might be indented underneath that. And you'd want to introduce that with an H3. I've also used H3s for like a call to action at the end of the page.
And the H1, 2, and 3 is what you'll see in the coding.
So you can actually use it on most websites. You can just highlight your sentence and then change it from a paragraph text to the different H tag.
Okay.
But these are the most important on-page elements on the page, the most highly emphasized ones.
Right.
And so what they do is they say, hey, this page is about and you have the keyword in there, is about this. That's your overarching with your H1. Your H2 talks about, hey, this section of this page is about this. And then the H3 is kind of like a subset of the H2. So what you want to have is the paragraph, you have paragraph text underneath all of these elements, right? So the H1, you probably have about 150 to 250 words before you get down to your first H2 tag. So you want to have the repetition of your keyword within the H1 at least once,
right?
Maybe two or three times, but you don't want to overdo it, right? Your H2 tag, you want to have your keyword underneath that. But here's the thing, we write differently. So it doesn't have to be the same thing. Google understands that if the verbiage says that we have to change the syntax of how the word is being said, they will understand it.
Okay.
So something that would be overly spammy would be if that focus keyword that's in the H1 tag showed up 15 times to 25 times on that page.
Right. Yes.
Right. So that's called keyword stuffing. And we're really, really forcing it everywhere. And if they put it in the H2 tags too, it's just overly done.
Right.
So that is not a good user experience. Google's not going to rank the content for that. That's maybe something that might have worked back in 2010, but doesn't work. And it didn't work so well even then. So that's kind of a spammy experience. It's not a good experience when you have people bounce off your website. The more people leave your website very quickly, Google understands that and will use that against you. So.
Okay. Right. So that's another reason that you don't want to be putting that out there.
Right.
Is there any relationship between a person's social media presence and their Google ranking?
So not their Google ranking. So if you have traffic that's coming in from, let's say coming in from LinkedIn, It's actually coming in from a different source medium if you were looking in your Google Analytics or whatever your analytics platform is. So it would come in as a social media organic, or if it was paid tactic, it would come in as paid. So it doesn't really have any emphasis on that. However, if you did a guest post, and people sometimes overdo guest posts, but if you had a website that was all about shoes and foot issues, right? Maybe I don't remember what they call those, the foot doctors, but
right. Okay.
But if you did a guest article on a local foot doctor's website for him that was really helping his audience out, but you were able to get a link from your author bio on that, and then it linked over to your website. Now and you're selling shoes. Now you've got a very relevant link because it's from a foot doctor's site, which is very relevant topically,
right?
And it's linking over and to your site, and it's helping you out,
right?
So those type of relationships are about striking up those relationships locally. Or if you are not a local website, and if you're something you want to do your side hustle there, then you have to find those relationships and communities. And there's different ways to do that. And podcasting is actually an awesome way to do that because you can find relevant topics and relevant people to have a relationship with and get great links to relevant content.
Right. As far as being a guest on a podcast, you mean?
Well, you can do it two ways. So if you're a guest on the podcast and they link within the show notes of their show back to your specific pages and bio, that's one way. If you have a guest on your show and you say, hey, I see that you have a page about all these podcasts that you've been on, that you link off to them or you have the player on them.
Right. So
you can give them the player. And if you have the links within your hosting of your player, then it would be within the embed of that. And if they don't have a player, you can have them just link directly to that. So that's another way you can do that. Right. And then it's topically relevant. And at the same time, if you're being within a podcast, you are topically relevant.
Yes. Because
you're matching up the shows and the guests of who you're going to be on. And you're also getting referral traffic. Referral traffic is great because you have a audience that's listening, loves their host, listens to that. And then you have the chance of them coming over to your show. So it's great.
So those would all be valuable links back and forth between your website and theirs.
It would be all valuable, plus you're building up your reputation. So if you build up within your website, you say, hey, I also do this, also known here.
Yes.
Now you're building up social proof on your website, just kind of the same way is like, seen in Forbes or it's the same thing. You're building up your reputation on your site. So it's good.
Okay. Is there something that I should have asked you about SEO that I haven't yet?
SEO is such a big topic.
For sure. It's one of those things that the more you dive into, you realize how vast it is.
It is. Even after 13 years, I'm still learning things. And for me, the minute that I say I'm there, I'm in danger because if we know anything else, like change is constant, right? So I think that what a business owner has to do is to remain agile, is that SEO is constantly in change and flux, just like your business, and you're going to have to adjust to it. What I would say is take a deep breath. It's okay that you don't figure this out in one day. You're not going to. I've been doing it for 13 years and I'm still figuring things out. I think my main thing that when I fully came to the realization, I said, this is not about me. This is not about my website. Focus on what is the benefit to the user. Once I started switching that dynamic as to saying, what value can I give? What value can the website give? And you're switching that. It's not about what I can get, but it's what I can give.
Yes.
And if your website can do that, and the more that you have assets on your site that give, you're going to have a dedicated, loyal following coming to your website that loves your content. I would suggest, how can you give your content in different ways? So for instance, if you are giving a PDF, can you give it in a video? If you're giving a video, can you have that also as an audio? People digest content differently. So the more, it's not just, SEO is really it's just the entry point, right? But how do we entertain them while they're on the site so that they want to come back? That's really what we need to do.
Right. And as far as that content too, I honestly, when choosing guests for this podcast and crafting the questions, it's always about thinking about the listener starting or
Right.
expanding their side hustle, and what do they want to learn about? What questions would they ask?
Right.
Right. And let's face it, I mean, podcasts are side hustles as well. So
They are. They are. I haven't figured out how to monetize it yet, but I'm loving it. So,
since you and I are both podcasters, and other side hustle heroes that I've had, several of them have talked about the benefits of either being a guest or a host and all the reasons why. And of course, that plays into SEO as well. So if someone does want to start a podcast, how would they address their SEO?
right. So here's what I realize I have not been doing with my SEO and my podcast. So I've been
The shoemaker with the holy shoes. Is that what you're telling me?
No. So I haven't been directing my guests to saying like, I want to talk specifically on this topic, right? And here's the keyword research I want to talk about. So if we did 2 episodes, if we specifically got guests that were experts and say, hey, I need to talk about this, and this. These are the main, not just questions. Like typically we say, hey, these are the questions I want to ask you, or we have a guest that come on that says, these are the topics I'm really relevant on, and here are the top 10 questions that you can ask me. If we dove deeper and we say, look, I have an episode dealing with this issue. This is what I want to cover. I have these questions that I need to answer.
So
right?
you're talking about the guest or the host?
I'm talking about the host basically doing keyword research up front and saying, I want to rank for this keyword within this episode, right? How do I do that? So I want to make sure that I do the keyword research up front. I'm going to make it more robust. So I'm going to answer these questions that people are asking about this topic as well. And here are some other related topics. I'm going to pepper that all into the questions I'm going to ask. I'm going to give that as a list of questions to my guest up front and saying, like, these are what I need to answer. Can you help me with that? Or what can we do with this? Right. Then we have our keyword for our title of our podcast, right? We have a meta description we develop off of that. We're going to have show notes that we create from that. We're going to get a transcription. We're going to make sure our transcription is in HTML format so it can be crawled. It's not going to be hidden. We're going to actually embed it on the podcast episode itself. And now Google's going to understand, oh, they're really talking about this. They're going about this in breadth and depth. We know it's not just the audio that we have on here. Our show notes are going to cover that topic. Our transcription is going to cover that topic. And heck, we might even be able to get some links on that topic as well, back to that post.
So what you've described is something that's going well above and beyond just a website. So you're saying anything that somebody puts out there, like for example, in planning this episode about SEO, right. You're saying what I could have done, should have done. What was possible is to have an SEO strategy for every episode. Here's what I want to rank for, and here's the content for all those fantastic reasons that you just mentioned. So similarly, if someone is creating a blog post for their website, for their area of expertise, your suggestion by the sound of it is go in, you gave us those 2 websites,
right?
Find out what keywords you got a chance of ranking at. And it's going to be multiple words,
yep,
right, to drill down on that niche, and then craft that blog piece accordingly.
Right. Do a little bit of an outline or a content brief of how you want to cover that. And then from there, you can write out the in breadth and depth, the content, the same type of thing, structure we can use for podcasts. Haven't been doing podcasting that way. I've been just interviewing guests and having a great time and trying to find out what their breakthrough and aha moments are. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And now I'm going to be switching gears a little bit. So,
well, I can see the challenge in that because, again, just taking this episode on CEO, for example,
right?
I mean, that's such a huge topic. And the chances of us rating for SEO, it's going to be, when you've got...
We would have to niche down. So we would have to say like, okay, I want to do an episode on, maybe we're doing an episode on podcast SEO and link building, right?
Right.
Or link building for podcast SEO, something like that, right? And the whole topic would be around that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I invite for future episodes, we could certainly do something like that. So, but it's really about like, okay, we got to have a strategy in place to do that. What are we going to do? And it may be my new thing that I'm going to actually start talking more about for podcasters. Right. So I think some podcasters do this really well and have a strategy, but I don't think a lot of podcasters talk about this.
Any listener in any side hustle is to dig into those keywords. What could you drill down? What could you specialize in? And then when you are a guest on a podcast or you're writing an article or whatever it might be, you're keeping that in the back of your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that should be a plan that we do. So if you are a host, you're usually offering questions up to saying, hey, here are the different questions. That's what I end up doing. I end up saying 6 to 10 different questions that I offer up to the guests based upon what their experience are.
Yes.
And I'm usually have tried to do it because I want to hear their experience. I want to hear their story. I have a new podcast coming out. So I have 2 podcasts. I have one podcast, which is the EMJ podcast, which talks about the breakthrough and aha moments of business owners, just kind of so that we can see what the kind of like the sand traps that they fell into and like how they got out of the sand traps, what they had to change, whether it was their mindset or how they did business or whatever it was and how it affected their marketing.
Nice.
So I love hearing those stories from entrepreneurs and business leaders, how they did that.
Well, EMJ, that doesn't have the word Matt in there anywhere.
No,
what does EMJ stand for?
So EMJ stands for Entrepreneur's Marketing Journey. And so my company is EMJ Media.
Okay.
And then we have a new podcast which just launched, which is on the same website, which is emjpodcast.com. And this podcast is called Focus Visibility. And it's all about strategies that business owners can take advantage of right away. Because it's great. Hey, the one podcast gave you like some insights, but I wanted to give them strategies that they could implement right away for their business. So
right. Nice. And I'll definitely have those in the show notes.
Thank you.
So that's probably the best place for our listeners to connect with you is through that site.
emjpodcast.com. Yep.
And I'll just toss this in as a suggestion for people. And I learned this from a longtime radio show host. And he's the one that got me started doing it. And that is, as a guest, I write out basically one sheet that confirms the time, the number to call into, or the link to, depending on whatever the case may be. And here are some sample questions that you're welcome to ask me if it helps in your preparation. And oftentimes those are used. I've been on radio shows where they've asked me exactly what I've given them. Right. And based on what we've just been talking about, I can craft those questions based on my...
Oh, I love it. So what we're talking about is an SEO one sheet. So the one sheet normally is a static, as Joan said, is a static sheet that we normally have with 10 questions. But if you wanted to talk about various different topics, we could take that one sheet and say, because it also says like what you're an expert on, right? Yeah. So what you could do is say, okay, here are the 10 questions I want to talk about on this show, and have that be the supporting content for the content writer we were just talking about before. It's those 10 questions. And now we can even provide the link in there of where we want to link back to the specific page that we want to boost. So that could be the strategy of that. I love that. I'm going to borrow that.
Please do.
That's great.
Well, Matt, you've done so much in the world of SEO. You've got not one, but 2 podcasts now.
Yep.
Clearly, you're someone knows how to get things done. So what's your best tip to inspire others to pursue their side hustle dream?
I would say 2 or 3 things. Avoid shiny object syndrome. So there's always going to be some type of course or some type of thing that is in the email or is being brought in front of you by Facebook, whatever. I would say find your passion. What are you passionate about that you really like that you feel could be possibly a good business idea? So that would be the important thing. If you can find a way to connect your passion with monetization, huge value. And mindset's key. So I think the mindset for you to get starting and just going, just taking the momentum and putting one step and one task in front of the other, mindset is key. And then you just have to keep on doing little things each day, because the little things, they all add up, right? So if it's talking to a developer, getting your website set up, writing your content, whatever it might be, forming a business plan, however you're going to work on the side hustle, just keep moving forward. And then you're going to look back 3 months later and go, wow, I've got 2 podcasts.
How did that happen? And what was I thinking?
Oh my goodness, this is taking a lot of time.
Thank you so much, Matt, for sharing your knowledge, giving us some really actionable tips about improving our SEO, and for being today's side hustle hero.
Oh, thank you so much.
If you're the DIY type, I highly recommend taking a video course on improving your SEO. For example, there are a lot to choose from at udemy.com, Udemy, that are pretty inexpensive, and some will walk you through how to use free tools like the one that Google provides for keyword research. The link is in the show notes. You don't need to be running ads, but once you're signed into Google's Keyword Planner, you go to Discover New Keywords. There, you can input any keywords, and it'll show you how many times per month, on average, people are searching using that keyword. Matt mentioned domain authority and page authority. There's another free tool, a Chrome extension called MOZbar, M-O-Z, that will show you that information for each of the search results generated from any keyword that you're researching. Although SEO can be a deep rabbit hole to jump into, there are people who are pros, and if you don't have the budget to pay them cash, how about doing a trade of services? But if you are the DIYer, keep in mind what Matt said about doing a little bit each day. Over the days, weeks, months, it really adds up, and before you know it, you'll be talking SEO like a pro. Well, that's a wrap for today. You'll find a link to Matt's website in the show notes and on our website, sidehustleheropodcast.com. And I'd love to hear your feedback on the show, on the guests, how this podcast is helping you. What areas could we do better? Shoot me an email message to hello@joanposivy.com or by DM on Instagram @joanposivy. Thanks for listening, and hustle on.